equity and social inclusion. Okay, everyone, I almost forget to tell you that our webinar is also live in YouTube. So maybe after this webinar ended and you still wanted to listen to this webinar, you can check our YouTube at PWYP Indonesia. Okay, I will continue that we're going to talk about enabling gender equity and social inclusion on energy transition in ASEAN. Lots of people already talk about energy transitions, like everywhere. Every organizations that focus on green development, something like that, for sure they talk about this energy transition. But enabling gender equity, enabling the social inclusion, making sure that nobody left behind in the process of the transition, that is the thing that we should be part of it. We should push, we should as the civil society organization, we should make sure that how the social inclusion is included in the transition process. And also, I would like to invite my colleagues, my panelists. There will be 3 panelists on this webinar. The first panelist is Cheng Pagulayan, or Joel. Yes, you can see Joel or Cheng. Maybe I should call you Cheng instead of Joel.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, Cheng. That sounds so friendly to me. So, okay, so we have Cheng. He is the advocacy officer in climate change and energy transition in Oxfam in Philippines. And also the second panelist, we have Grita Anindarini.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Grita. How's your day?
I'm good. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. So Grita is program director for Indonesian Center for Environmental Law, or ICEL Indonesia. And also the third one, we have the one and only Mona Wasef. Hi, Mona. How are you?
Good.
Okay, so Mona is the head of research and advocacy division in PWYP Indonesia. Maybe for the first turn, I would like to invite Cheng to tell your story on your work about the gender equity and social inclusion, maybe in Oxfam Philippines or in Philippine in the context. So maybe the floor is yours and take your time to elaborate this issue. Come on, Cheng.
Yeah, thank you so much, Apis. Hi, everyone. My name is Cheng. I'm from Oxfam, Pilipinas, in the Philippines. So I think the focus more of my discussion is on gender just energy transition. We've been talking a lot about energy transition, specifically in Southeast Asia as a coal region, but seldom that we talk about how or what gender just energy transition looks like for us. And I think as a starting discussion, maybe we would like to introduce or to share what we've done at Oxfam as a confederation in terms of understanding the context of gender on energy transition. So in our report that we produced last year, we published a report towards a just energy transition, implications for communities in lower to middle income countries. We saw that some of the key emerging inequalities that we have to address that's related to energy transition is gender-based discriminatory practices, roles, socio-cultural norms, myths, and laws that affect, how women and girls in all their diversity will benefit from the energy transition. So as an elaboration of this context is that women and girls suffer the brunt of lack of access to clean and affordable energy, specifically for low and middle income countries, such as the Philippines, and time spent, collecting firewood and the public health effects that, that these traditional energy or traditional energy sources have are they are primarily, drivers of inequality at the household level. And of course, it also touches on issues of reproductive work and unpaid care and domestic work of women and girls in at a household and community level. The second, observation and from the scoping study that we did is that in many rural contexts, specifically in Southeast Asia, women are responsible for growing food, for their family and for income, and so does land grabbing, whether for renewable energy or transition mineral extraction or fossil fuels, which puts a lot of burden, a lot of effects in the women's livelihoods, and of course the food security issue that we're also worried about. And then lastly, specifically on issues on energy and energy transition, men really greatly outnumber women because the opportunities in terms of economic and non-economic opportunities that we have in the energy sector are more geared towards men rather than women and people of diverse sexualities and genders. So this often creates more inequality, not only economic but also social and environmental inequalities that we have to be worried about in the energy transition. And more observations and findings on the scoping is that gender non-conforming people and other traditionally recognized third genders can also face specific vulnerabilities, such as legal barriers to express themselves in political processes, but they have to also specific and very important environmental roles in certain cultures, particularly in the Philippines. Gender non-conforming people are very active in the climate and energy justice movement, and the perspectives that we bring in the table, especially in energy and climate justice discussions, are very disruptive in a way that it also opens up other discussions that's not traditionally or that's not culturally talked about in our context. So some of these analysis that we also observed are queer ecology, how queer justice also intersects with climate and energy justice. So those are some observations that we had in the energy transition towards a just energy transition scoping work that we did. But I think a more case study type of sharing that I want to bring in the discussion of gender equity and social inclusion in the energy transition is our experience in small island communities in the Philippines, particularly in an off-grid context. So this is in partnership with our local partner CICAT, which is a Center for Indigenous Science and Technology, and Oxfam Philippines. So this is the island. This is Dolores, Ahilabaan Island in Dolores, Eastern Samar, and it's an island with over, I think, with almost 600 households, and most of its households are unelectrified. So this is also a very common, last mile situation where a small island is still energy poor and lack access to sustainable clean energy. And their context is that aside from low to no access to electricity, this lacking aspect of energy and renewable energy situation hindered the community members for more economic activities, more economic productivity. It also compounded, burden on women and girls, particularly in the household and community level. And of course, the continuous rise of fuel costs and electricity bills are compounding the the burdens of women, because particularly in this context, women and girls are often in the situation of managing the the household's finances and managing the economic and non-economic aspects of their house in the household. So as an approach to energy transition, Oxfam Pilipinas and our partner CCAT did several activities and strategies to address justice issues that the women and girls in the community are experiencing. So one is our key entry point in this activity, in this initiative, is empowering women community leaders to manage their alternative RE power source, which is now an community managed and women-led solar power facility in the island. Next entry point that we had is addressing the unequal unpaid care and domestic work that women are experiencing in the household. So through community organizing of our partner and of course conducting rapid care analysis and household dialogues, we were able to surface key issues at the household level and community level that addresses or identifies the barriers that the women and girls have in their communities. And then also an integral part of our approach in energy transition is the democratization of energy systems through community level discussions on climate, on renewable energy, on gender equality, and of course with participatory energy planning processes in the community level. So those approaches with partnerships and community organizing and participatory planning addresses the energy justice issues that we want to address. So this first one is procedural justice, where the affected communities, in our context, the small island communities, have say, or they have a stake in decision making, particularly in their energy systems. Next is recognition-based justice. We recognize that there are injustices already happening at the community and household level through women and girls. So we make sure that by recognizing those inequalities, that we don't create new injustices in the process of transitioning to renewable energy, but we prevent, we avoid them, we recognize, and then we avoid and we prevent them. And lastly, distributive justice, which just says that there must be a fair distribution of the responsibilities and capabilities with governments, with the civil society, with the women organization that we engage, and with the private sector that are doing the energy, a bulk of the energy transition work. Next is that there is a fair distribution of costs, making sure that no shifting of burdens are happening at the local level. So we make sure that the women will not be burdened more in the process. And lastly, that the co-benefits and benefits of the energy transition are fairly distributed at the community level, and that we make sure that it trickles down up to the most affected populations and the most affected sectors at the community level. So just a few interventions, very specific ones that we did in the community is that we strengthen, the community participation in renewable energy installation. So this creates, ownership, and also creating the trust or building the trust of the community members that this project that we're doing, the energy transition movement, is actually a movement driven by the people and driven by community participation. Another intervention that we did with the small island community members is a formation of a self-help group So this is a small group. It started as a small group of women in the community to have a community savings of some sort, but it evolved into a social enterprise for the women in the community to also enable them to diversify their economic and livelihood options. So now they have more than 100 members in the island. So almost all of the women in the household in the island are members of the self-help group, which pitches in as a community savings group. They pitch in the solidarity fund that they have and use it to manage their energy source. They use it for the maintenance of their RE, solar-powered RE system. And then, of course, since this is an island community, we also tried to integrate, a renewable energy in their motorboats that they use for fishing. We put solar lights in their docking areas in the coastal community. And then, of course, integral part of our approach is building the capacities of women to manage their own energy systems. So some of the outcomes that we had in these initiatives are the association that we help organize themselves. The Hilabaan Women's Association already purchased on their own solidarity fund that they have, the savings that they had. They were able to purchase additional battery capacity for their own solar power system. They were empowered to, because they know that the organizations that help them, Oxfam Pilipinas and SICAT, won't be there for long. They now have the responsibility to sustain the energy system that they have. So now they were able to purchase, additional battery capacity, their own additional solar panels that cost them almost 40,000 pesos. So this is around $735. This is a big amount, especially for communities, rural communities in small islands. And this, in terms of their membership, it grew into more than 100 members from a small group now to 100 members. That's co-leading and co-managing the facility, the solar power facility in the island. So also as a response, to the earlier context that I provided, that women are burdened with reproductive and unpaid care, we also saw and observed, how the RE facility, how this energy system helped them reduce unpaid care, especially for women in the households. And of course, another outcome from this initiative is that women, young people in the community now have more time to do their schoolwork, now have more time to spend, in doing assignments that they have for school. Because before, since they only have the morning, the daytime to do it, they weren't able to give much attention to education. And the renewable energy facility provided them this opportunity to be more active at school and be more proactive in their schoolwork. So yeah, I think it also creates, the energy transition work that we did also created more opportunities than we've expected. Because this is initially idea that we pilot, a renewable energy facility managed by women, but we also saw that it also somehow influenced policy in at the local level, because now the local government is looking at it as a model community that they want to replicate and scale up in other communities in the local in the province, and of course at the municipal level. So there's an increasing demand of RE infrastructure that they want to include in the local budget, local government budget. There's also a push, for a more decentralized energy system in island villages. So some island villages near Hilabaan Island are also asking, how they did it, how they also want to do it, how they also don't want to do it in their own, island villages. Of course, expanding, women's economic empowerment through renewable energy opened up, this discussion that it's possible. A self-help approach could be one, but also renewable energy as an entry point to women's economic empowerment is a key driver, to addressing unpaid care and addressing reproductive, work burdens. So it also opens up, capacity building and technical skills training for women now that renewable energy is not solely a man's job or like a man's work, but for everyone. So it also increased, interest for RE developers, to explore island renewable energy potential, and other, aspects that we are also keen on continuing is the promoting energy democracy through people and ecology-centered planning and budgeting. So these are some opportunities that we see coming from our work with small islands with and women and girls in the communities. So yeah, I think I'll stop there. I think we have more time later to talk about it, but I'll stop here, and happy to get your questions later at the open forum. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chang, for the inspiring work for this renewable energy in small islands in Philippines. So I think it is a common situation in ASEAN, in our region, where the outer area, they still don't have the electricity. They're still unelectrified, with so many households that they don't have access to the electricity. So how to make sure the access that they get is easier for them just to live day by day to survive. And also I agree with Chang that women they stigmatized by the burden to be productive for the family. So how we can make sure that this transition, this energy transition, can be equal to everyone, as if this renewable energy job is not only the man job, it is for everyone. So thank you, Chang. We can later discuss about this work in the Q&A session. And also I will continue with Mbak Grita from ISEL Indonesia that will currently talk about the gender equity and social inclusion in energy transition in ASEAN. So as we know that maybe in the national level, each country in ASEAN, maybe we have national plan on renewable energy, but how the perspective of our regional ASEAN, and I'm totally excited to hear about that. And also we have lots of ASEAN summit that talks on renewable energy, and how is that progressing until right now, or is it efficient enough? Is it working enough, or we need the policy reform to make sure that this energy transition works for the region? So time is yours, Mbak Grita.
Thank you, Mbak Pris. So good afternoon, everyone. I am Grita Anindaridi. I'm from Indonesian Center for Environmental Law. So I was so happy to have a discussion in here. because I think that this is an important issues that we have to discuss right now. Maybe I can share first, because I will start from here about the current state of energy transition in ASEAN. So in one hand, actually, ASEAN unfortunately is a home for new coal power plants. And as we see that in the right side of my presentation, most of ASEAN coal power plants are amongst 1 until 15 years old, which is in the early stage, which I think we don't have to discuss about the impacts of coal power plant in here. And need for energy transition is emerging right now in ASEAN. But in other hand, I also see that ASEAN member states actually already aware about the importance of energy transition, as ASEAN member states is currently running in expanding their renewable energy deployment, as we see in the left side on my presentation. And we see that how Vietnam in the forefront until right now about because we see the solar power plant program that is developing in Vietnam. But in terms of current energy transition process in ASEAN, we have to see about how this initiative actually brings risk on one side and opportunity on the other side to women and to other vulnerable communities and to other disadvantaged group. Because at one side, we see that how energy transition around ASEAN may affect to loss and increasing burden of. I choose the example woman in here because the most available data and research is about the woman. Although I also recognize how the importance we discuss about how this impact to disabled groups, for example, or for children, for example. But I have to admit that a discussion amongst these issues and disabled groups, for example, to children, for example, are still under discussed. So I do apologize if my example are more is most on women, but hope this is representative enough. But I would like to discuss that on one side, energy transition amongst ASEAN actually affect to loss and increasing burden of women, while on the other hand, it also provide good opportunities. So how we can balance this risk, mitigate the risk, and uplifting the opportunity is very important. So, for example, the risk, I will discuss about the risk first. We see how the Mekong Basin is a home for hydropower plants, and among in Cambodia, in Thailand, and in Laos, for example. There are so many big hydropower in Mekong Basin, and it somehow also affecting the loss of livelihoods and independent sources of income for women in that region. I took example in Laos because most of, or maybe all of women in there depend their living beings to the river, and the river somehow are really affecting to the big hydropower projects. And it disrupts the gender relations between within families and communities, and also push women into a situation of a greater poverty because their hydropower really disrupt their living beings. And somehow at this project, the companies, the project developer, give them compensation, but we see that compensation will not bring the river back. So somehow the compensation will not compensating the whole of living beings. So on the other hand, in Indonesia, the geothermal projects also brings increase of burden to the woman. In Baturaden geothermal, for example, how women had to fetch water for further away because back and forth through slippery path, because their rivers are polluted by mud as the impact of the Baturaden geothermal, and all of this risk somehow is not really assessed during the environmental impact assessment process. And this is a main issue when we talk about gender assessment in energy transition process, because as ISEL, as my organization, also reviewing many environmental impact assessment documents, very limited discussions on how this will be impacted to the women, to disability group, to children, for example, how the project will impact them is really limited, or even zero experiences on that. So this is so unfortunate. But on the other hand, we also recognize that energy transition also provide opportunity to the women, to the disability group, to children as well. For example, in Cambodia, how the solar powered water pump also already also helped the woman farmer in there in conducting their daily works, and the woman's health there has improved since the woman farmers do not need to carry heavy equipment and tools anymore because of this solar power plant. So based on this example, how the member states, how each stage, how each nation should develop the framework to first recognizing this risk and opportunity, distributing this opportunity and burden. And also, while we're talking about there are so many harms already happened, restoring as well their harms that already happened during this energy transition process. So I'm just, I will not discuss this in depth, because Cheng already discussed about this comprehensively. But I would like to add one principle of justice, actually. So Cheng already recognized how this just energy transition framework, if we would like to integrating gender and social inclusion framework, we have to recognize first that each individuals and group has different capacities, have different power to address the risk and to absorb the opportunities. And in terms of distributive, it is essential that all these impacted communities do not carry the overall burden of the transition, so it shall be fairly distributed. In terms of procedural, it is important as well that each community, that all groups also have meaningful participation. But I also would like to underline the importance of restorative justice in here, how the historical damage against individuals, against communities, and the environment must be addressed, and there should be a mechanism to rectifying the harms, to restoring the harms is also important to be recognized by each government, I think. So if we try to detailing this framework, I actually make this kind of proposed framework. I know this is not really complete, but maybe this is enough for our initial discussion. For example, in order to addressing such challenges, we have to recognize first that it is important to have stakeholders identification and recognition, especially vulnerable and historically marginalized groups. In terms of this, I think the most important issue right now is how our policymakers and how the project developer actually has this gender equity and social inclusion mindset in their planning or in their decision-making process. So it is important to raise the awareness regarding gender-based violence, regarding gender-sensitive issues during energy transition process. It is also important to conduct training on gender equity for me, particularly for men, in anticipation of any backlash caused by changes in gender norms. And it is also important for me, in my opinion, it is important to have also a transformative national or regional or subnational policies that consider how benefits and burdens will be distributed, where jobs are gained, where jobs are lost, and the implementation of upskilling, the skilling for workers, and how we could equipping women, people with disabilities, and other vulnerable groups with skills, assets, and opportunities to participate in the transition process is really important. In terms of procedural justice, yes, we do have environmental impact assessment. Yes, we do have consultation public during environmental impact assessment, but how this gender analysis really incorporated under this process is really lacking. So how we could promote a process, decision-making process, which really integrating gender analysis is important as well. And develop grievance mechanism that accessible for all communities, including disabled group. And for me, it is important as well to implementing community-based energy projects, like Cheng said, it's like democratization of energy, how each communities, how, for example, the woman could freely choose what is the sources of energy that they would like to use, is also important. And regarding restorative justice, I think it is important to have to enforce, for example, the reclamation and post-mining fund implementation, how this fund could be used to remedying past harms, and fair compensation also important. And I get some sons in South Africa, for example, they also implementing land redistribution, not to women, but to Black people in there, to empower the Black economic empowerment that has been destroyed prior to the energy projects, and also social protection program. So these are the purpose, the framework that I think is actually important. But as I see in ASEAN, in ASEAN energy policy, I see the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Corporation, for example, ASEAN Energy Outlook, ASEAN Joint Statement on Climate Change. So in the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Corporation right now, unfortunately, there is still no gender, disability, and other social inclusion references under this plan. And in the ASEAN Energy Outlook, there is a limited references regarding gender issues in there, but it's too limited only on the household chapter. So if we go back to the framework before, when regarding the distributive justice, regarding the restorative, and etc., this is still limited because it's only mentioning how the women and energy nexus only recognizing under household issues. And ASEAN Joint Statement on Climate Change, it's also on the limited references regarding gender. It's only refers that, okay, a woman is a vulnerable and marginalized group, but no action to promote such issues, unfortunately. But despite that, I also recognize that ASEAN has various policy documents on gender-specific issues. but still there is no connection between how this how this framework in gender-specific issues will be implemented in the energy transition process, unfortunately, but this is still an opportunity. And this is my last slide. I think in terms of national levels, I think that the biggest challenge is how we could integrating this gender analysis, gender discussion in the strategic level. But I must say that unfortunately until now, there is still lack of discussion regarding disability group and children, and how this and other vulnerability groups, indigenous people, for example, and how this connected, how the connection to the energy transition, and also lack of data is, for example, disaggregated data is also one of the biggest challenges. So for me in ICEL, the opportunity for the next action is how we could, the first thing first, how we could promote the role of women's union, women's affairs ministers, disability groups, social ministries, in the decision-making process. So the awareness will uplift. And it is also important for me to each member stage to develop the gender responsive indicators that applicable to energy transition plan. So we could use the ASEAN framework, for example, if we talk about regionally. But in the project level, it is also important to support the gender analysis and gender mainstreaming, mainly in the environmental impact assessment and strategic environmental assessment documents, because that is that these documents supposed to be the comprehensive documents to assess the economical, to assess the social, to assess the environmental impact roughly, including to these vulnerable communities. I think that's all, please. And if you would like to see more about our research regarding the gender impact, so we develop a tool regarding gender impact assessment in AIA process. Unfortunately, this is in Bahasa, but we can, you could find it in ICEL website for more discussions. Thank you, Mbak.
Thank you, Mbak Grita. What a brief and compact presentation from Mbak Grita. I highlight some of the presentation point, which I am surprised that ASEAN is still became a coal power plant, young new coal power plant, 1 until 15 years, and it will be doubled in a decade later. And that's why the urgency of this renewable energy and making sure that women, children, elder people, people with disability, and also vulnerable groups are counted when it comes to the decision-making process in the regional level. That is the point of discussion of Mbak Grita. And right now I am jumping to Mbak Mona. She will be talking about mainstreaming the gender equality and gender equality, disability, and social inclusion on energy transition with Indonesian context. You may proceed, Mbak Mona.
Okay, thank you, Hafiz. Let me share my screen first. Can you see my screen, the PPT?
Yes, it is clear.
Okay, thank you, Apris. Thank you, Cheng and Grita, for the comprehensive explanation on gender equity and social inclusion, and especially in Philippines. In Philippines, we can see a lot of case that the community can have or can manage their own renewable energy resource. And in this presentation, I will explain about how to mainstreaming the gender equality, disability, and social inclusion into the energy transition. But in this presentation, I will more into the Indonesia context. Okay, let's move to the background. As Cheng and Grita said before, that ASEAN is a regional that have ASEAN is in the front of the climate crisis, and if the ASEAN couldn't mitigate the climate crisis and provide some steps into the energy transition, it will damage their GDP. As EU-ASEAN Business Council said in 2021 that ASEAN as a region could lose 37.4% of its current GDP if the ASEAN countries didn't make or move forward to the climate mitigation. And although, like Greta said before, ASEAN is still depend on the coal power plant. Although in some of the documents, such the Asian Energy Cooperation Plan, ASEAN has a planning to including 25 reduction of in greenhouse gas emission by 2030. So in terms of Indonesia, Indonesia also has planned to achieve net zero emission by 2060. But if Indonesia get a lot of help, support from the international, we want to achieve the net zero emission to 2050. And in the term of the national energy mix, Indonesia has planned to mix the renewable energy until 31% in the 2050. And beside all of the regulation that right on the energy transition, we still have discussing about how the gender mainstreaming and social inclusion included in this energy transition process, especially in Indonesia. Like in this case, Indonesia has a lot of energy transition policy from the law number 30 2007, and we also have the government regulation, president regulation, and also the ministry regulation. We have a lot of regulation in terms of the energy transition. And the new one is the Just Energy Transition Partnership that has been agreed during the G20 summit in Bali, and all of the G7 countries promised to, I believe, give us loan around 2 billions to 20 billions, I believe, to help Indonesia decommissioning their coal power plants. And several months ago, PWYP Indonesia wrote a research paper on how to mainstreaming the JETSI into the framework in the energy transition in Indonesia. As we can see, even though Indonesia has a lot of regulation on JETSI, such as how to move to gender equality empowerment for the women, also on the child protection, also the elderly population and people with disabilities. It's important to remind the government and in the national or the local level that gender mainstreaming must also include the gender responsive budgeting and gender budget taking. Because based on our experience, when we talk with several local governments in Sumatra, they said that we talked with the energy and resources offices in the Jambi. They said that they couldn't put in the gender mainstreaming. One of the reasons is because they didn't have the budget to include the activity to provide the gender mainstreaming into their planning. And yeah, so we can see that we have a lot of regulation, but the main question is how about the practice how about the implementation in the area that impacted by the mining the building of the energy transition. As like Chang and Greta said before, there are several indicators in terms of justice that we can use how to incorporate JC in the energy transition. But in this presentation, I combine it with the APKM parameters. Okay, APKM is Indonesia term, but the English one is access, participation, control, and benefit. We combine these APKM parameters into three types of the justice that Greta said before: recognition justice, distributive justice, and procedural justice. To make sure that the women and people with disabilities and elderly people, also child, to make sure the participation in the process of the energy transition in Indonesia, we offer these 5 principles to the governments. The first one is participation and control in decision making, and the second is economic benefits, and the third one is access to natural resources, education, and information, and the fourth one is social cultural identification, and the last one is prevention and remedial mechanism. The other thing that we should remember is the inclusion mechanism. The inclusion mechanism doesn't mean, of course, it's important to invite the women, child, or the people with disabilities to discuss on the policy or ask them to join the discussion at the local level when the companies or the government want to build maybe the PLTA or the solar power plant and something like that. But we should also encourage that local communities usually has their specific or their unique resource of the energy. Such as in the West Nusa Tenggara Barat, NTT, Nusa Tenggara Timur, and also West Nusa Tenggara Barat, they have their own energy, such as the cow manure. It's like the kotoran sapi. They use it to make their own energy. And some of the village in the Nusa Tenggara Timur also use like copra. Copra is coconut, that dry coconut. They burn it and use the energy from the burning of the coconut to electricity. So it's important to not impush the regulation from the top to the local level without discuss with them first, or without identify the local energy that can be used by the community. Because when we use the local resources, it can also give them benefit of to their income. So we provided this 5 principles, and we wrote a more detailed indicator to incorporate the JC into the just energy transition in Indonesia. And the first one is, like I said before, participation and control in decision making. I will tell some of this because Greta already explained it before. And the first one is the recognition of the right of vulnerable groups. Yeah, and it's important for the people to give the FPIC consent. And the other one is the gender disaggregated data. We talked with the several ministry in national level that one of the reason that it's a bit difficult to make a good policy that included the women and people with disability or vulnerable group is because we don't have good data on gender. It's not on the gender or like female or male, but also about the people with disability. most of the maybe some of the ministries said that most of us forget about these people with disability, and so it is important to remind stakeholders, especially the government, if they want to create a policy related to the energy transition, it's also important to include the people with disability, because we don't want the same experience like the before, which is they didn't have the right or didn't have included into the discussion on the process of the creating the policy. And one of the, when we talk with the government, one of the legislator from the Komisi 7, they said that they already when they write regulation related to the energy transition, they have discussed with the women group, but they haven't discussed it with the people with disability. And also this economic benefits, I will explain it later, or you can just read it later. And one thing that I want to explain is in terms of the people with disability, they should give several choices, because I give a case that in West Nusa Tenggara Barat, in Lombok, one of the communities, people with disabilities communities, said that even though it's dangerous to their health using the kayu bakar, what is it, kayu bakar, using the wood to make a fire, but they choose to use the wood to cooking, because they couldn't have the ability to use the liquid gas, because and they share the experience that when they ask their neighbor to help them with the liquid gas, they get the harassment, the sexual harassment. So it is important not to push the regulation to the people with disability without consult with them, or without give them the knowledge and capacity or capability to use the technology. And also there are also some cases that in terms of the use the electricity, such as the vehicle or the kompor listrik, stove. Not all of the household in Indonesia has enough capacity to use the stove. Like I said before, that some of the area in Indonesia, in the remote area, they didn't have the electricity. So the other one is the government should also develop a remedial mechanism, because even though Indonesia has a lapor, it's a platform to report anything to the government, but one thing that lack is the system or the platform couldn't be used by the people with disability, such as they don't have the voice talk, or the the platform cannot use easily by the people with disability. It's only can be used with people with non-disability. So what are the recommendation to the government? I think it is specific in Indonesia, but as we know that Indonesia already have the JP Secretariat in the Ministry of Energy and Resources, Mineral Resources. But even though the Secretariat has a working group, I think it would be better if the working group also have the specific working group on the JETSI aspect, to make sure that the JETSI will become the base of the enforcement plan or policy that created by the Secretariat JETSI. And I think again the data is important to make sure the policy will include it, women and people with disability and other vulnerable groups. I think that's all from me. We can discuss it more in the Q&A. Thank you, Grace.
Thank you, Mbak Mona. This is so comprehensive from Indonesian context of mainstreaming the gender equality, disability, and social inclusion. We see that the most group that still haven't really counted in a public decision on energy transition is disability. For example, and that Mona already mentioned before, our authority or forget to provide something that accessible for the disability people. We have like lots of regulation, we have lots of action plan, but sometimes we did not counted one group into the decision-making process. So this is very interesting on how we can make sure that no one left behind on this transition process. I think, but Mona, you haven't stopped your screen sharing. Okay, thank you. I see here that several people already sharing their opinion. Maybe I will start sorting out from our chat. There's Mbak Ike from Yogyakarta that said, in Maluku, conditions are almost similar to those in the Philippines. Women's activities are 80% closely related to energy, but women do not yet have a participating role in the energy sector. The dominant domestic role due to patriarchal culture and is a contributing factor. Public spaces for discussion about energy are masculine spaces that allow role and participation of women. Maybe Chang, would you like to react to the story of our friend here? That the condition is actually similar to the Philippines. And also there's another question that also from Ika, that sustainability is one of main problem of renewable energy implementation. Renewable energy installation was taken place and just operated for around 2 until 3 years in community. They don't have capacity to manage it, manage devices and money for reparation. This case happens in Indonesia. The policy of Indonesian government about energy authority does not clear enough right now. How can sustainability be done in Philippines and how far the role of women can contribute it? Cheng, maybe you can go ahead to answer the questions.
Yeah.
What
Okay.
heavy but interesting questions, yeah.
Yeah. I think I answered one.
Yes.
Apologies, I took the liberty to answer to one question in the chat, but yeah, I think for the first one on issues, I think this is a common narrative that the energy sector in general is male dominated. So in return, of course, it also espouses, patriarchal, culture and patriarchal beliefs that, in effect would also hinder women and people of diverse, sexualities and genders in participating meaningfully in spaces that would, allow them for economic or non-economic, development goals. And I think with the question on sustainability, I think one of the key things that we observed in the Philippines, it's I'm yet to see a literature about this, but in general, a key observation of energy projects that has been done in the Philippines are more shot in the dark. It's gender blind. It doesn't really take into consideration the important role of women in the energy transition. So they as a response, especially in government programs, they have energy projects. So due to our culture and our belief that if it's energy, it should be male or men managing the facility. So in terms of sustainability, you know what happened? It failed, of course, because the men in the households, for example, or in the community, have other full-time jobs that they have to, attend to. So in return, of course, the sustainability of the project, it failed. But in contrast to our experience, because structurally and contextually, in the community that we've worked with, the women are hindered by economic economic opportunities. That's why it's a good entry point for organizing them, and especially in building their capacity and building a constituency that women have the capacity to manage energy projects. And of course it connects to the sustainability aspect that we're now asking. We have to dismiss the preconceived notions that an energy project will fail. We have to look at other aspects why it failed, because an important lens that we have to think about is the gender perspective, because it's contextually women are prevented from these opportunities. That's why in terms of sustainability, they are more inclined to, they are more committed to such programs, because it provides them spaces, it provides them a sense of community and solidarity in sustaining such program. So yeah, I think other colleagues could also pitch in.
Yeah, thank you, Sheng, for the answer. So it is still a challenge about sustaining this energy project, but it is not impossible to make this sustain. I hope we are on the same page on that. And I would like to read another question. Maybe this time Mbak Grita can answer first. What kind of advocacy has been done by NGOs, Oxfam, ICEL, and PWYP to the government on energy transition to involve various genders in making policies issued more inclusive, especially advocacy to local government, not only at the national level? And what is the output? Is it effective enough? So, Mbak Grita, maybe you can go ahead to answer the questions.
Yeah, thank you. In terms of ICEL, and because we're working on a policy advocacy, actually, what we're doing is so firstly, we identified that one of the biggest challenge in mainstreaming gender issues, not only in energy transition but also in environmental decision making process as in general, is firstly the lack of implementing regulations. And secondly, is lack of instrument that can be used to integrating such issues. For example, in the general regulations, our governmental regulations already recognize that environmental impact assessment process shall consider shall consider gender, indigenous people, and vulnerable communities during the public consultation process, and substantively as well. But that is only one articles in the regulations, and it is very lack of implementation. So that's why in implementation in the institutions, this kind of gender analysis, this kind of gender assessment still lacking during the process. So what we're doing is collaborating with the planning bureau of the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. We're developing this instrument. Is a gender impact assessment instrument. Is a tools, kind of tools or instrument or steps how the project developer shall assess gender issues during the environmental impact assessment process. So if the question is whether this is effective enough, we haven't got the result yet as now, because still this is new. But I have to say that the biggest challenge is in the awareness first, and in the perspective of the environmental impact assessment process itself per se, because because one of the challenges is some of the staffs, or some of the institutional some of the ministry staffs thought that maybe it is very difficult, maybe it is very detailed for framework like environmental impact assessment. So it will need long time to mainstream such issues or to implementing these tools in the process. So what we see right now is training and awareness increasing on how the importance of gender analysis during the impact assessment process is important, as well as the gender budgeting as well, because they see that these tools is good, but if we would like to implementing these tools, it needs more fund to implement than before. So allocating more budget, or allocating specific budget to implement this gender these specific frameworks is also become the main challenges. So this is our organization initiative actually, but I do believe that there are so many organizations that working on collaborating with local governments. For example, I note that in many maybe PWYP could discuss about this, but because we're mainly engaging in national level. Yes.
Thank you, Mbak Grita, for the answer. And how about Publish What You Pay, Mbak Mona? How about the advocacy on gender and decision-making process, especially in the local government?
Yeah, thank you, Apris. In terms of the Publish What You Pay Indonesia, we recently published, not published yet, but we wrote a paper on how to mainstreaming the JETC into the energy transition in Indonesia, so that the energy transition will be just to the women, the people with disabilities, vulnerable group, and what is it? I forgot, and the child. And but it's on the national level, but in terms of the local level, we did several training with the women and the community at the area in the Morowali Utara. We discussed with them how to make the government of the natural resources in their area is better. As we know that maybe some of the participants already know about the EITI, Extractive Transparency Initiative. Indonesia is one of the implementing country, and Publish What You Pay Indonesia proposed that the requirement in the EITI to implement it in the local level, because one of the requirement in the EITI standard is how to improve the gender equality and the social inclusion in terms of the natural resources and energy governance. As we know that when we talk with the companies, we know that they didn't have the disaggregate data on the gender, how much the women that participate in their job, or on how much maybe the CF corporate social responsibility that specifically for the women and the child, they didn't have the data on it. So in the local level, we encourage the companies and also the local government to publish the data or or not published, not only published but provided the data, so the policy will be effective to the women and the other vulnerable group. And so, in the future, I think not only for the government but for the CEOs, or when we discuss about the energy transition, it's better to also it's a technical thing, but it's important to also invite the women right organization, that women right organization or woman organization or people with disability organization, so that we can hear directly their voice. So they also have the chance to talk with the government directly. So maybe in the future, PWYP or ICEL or others NGOs in here can invite the WRO or DPO as the participant, or also as the resource person. And maybe, so like April said before, that no one left behind in this energy transition process. Because if we don't invite them, they will not get the knowledge on what is it, this energy transition. If they don't have the knowledge, how they can understand it, how they can make the decision on it. Because usually that decision is imposed to the women or the people with disability by the national or by their neighbor or by the local government. So it is important to make sure that they have the enough knowledge to make their own decision by themselves. So not people make decision to them, but they make a decision if they want to use new technology, or if they want to follow this government decision, but based on their own knowledge. So I think it's the future. It's one of my suggestions.
Thank you so much, Mbak Mona. This is a reflection for all of us that when we talk about energy transition, and also when we talk about gender equality, disability, social inclusion, don't forget to invite them to our forum. Don't forget to ask them to be our panelists. Don't forget to include them to all of the discourse on energy transitions, because they are the one who are the most related to the transition itself. And PWYP Indonesia itself, we have done some national convening that we invited women right organizations, disability people organizations to our forum, and ask them what they need to actually ensure they're included in the decision-making process. Maybe if I could add up from PWYP Indonesia in our advocacy to this gender equality, disability, and social inclusion in energy transition. And maybe we can do it bigger in a regional level, because this forum is actually also a road to regional convening. We will do the same. That the last time was national convening in Indonesian context, but this August, end of August 29 until 31 August will be the regional convening that we're gonna talk about energy transition for the gender equality, disability, and social inclusion, but in ASEAN level. So this is one of the road to regional convening. I forgot to mention this in the beginning of our forum, and that's why this forum is totally special to us. And I would like to continue for people who wants to discuss with our panelists here. Please type your questions, and I would like to continue. Maybe this question is a bit sensitive, but we totally open for the questions that Donna asked. Thank you so much for the presentations. I would like to hear more on LGBTIQ individuals and networks can be involved in the energy transition process, considering the restrictions in the ASEAN region regarding LGBTIQ. We know that not all of the ASEAN countries legalize the LGBTIQ participations like that, but maybe we can open to answer this question as natural as possible, but open to the chance to maybe Cheng or who can give us new perspective on this.
Yeah. Maybe I can start, but some colleagues, Grita or Muna can pitch in later. In terms of engaging the LGBTIQ sector in the energy transition movement, I think the entry point that we have in the context of the Philippines is through the climate justice lens, because now there's a constituency of a young and queer people in the Philippines, advocating for climate justice, and now it's also intersecting with our advocacy on energy justice, because as I've mentioned, one of our key findings, especially at Oxfam during our Just Energy Transition study, is that people of diverse, people of gender minorities or people of diverse sexualities have, limited spaces, particularly in these kinds of spaces. Maybe it's a lucky, a platform for me, a young queer person in the Philippines, in Southeast Asia, to share a space with everyone. So I think it's important that we have that conscious lens in advocating, in also including young and fresh perspectives on energy transition. But in terms of, very specific programmatic lens on energy transition, we're yet to explore that path. And maybe I know Donna, so I met Donna already in the Philippines. So maybe we could explore how ASEAN Soji Caucus could also be a part, of the energy transition movement, and how we could mainstream, the discussion of queer people towards a just energy transition. So yeah.
Thank you, Cheng, for the perspective on young and queer communities advocating the energy transition. And I would like to continue to next question by Rauda, that this is also for Cheng. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was very insightful, but I would like to ask you some questions. How has the Philippines ensured marginalized community, particularly women, are actively involved and benefit from energy transition project and policies? And are these specific data collection methods or tools used by the Philippines, Oxfam in Philippines, to assess the gender-specific impacts of energy transition policies and project? You may proceed, Cheng.
Yeah. A lot of questions for me. Okay. But yeah, I think for number one, how did we ensure that marginalized communities, particularly women, are engaged in the space on energy transition? I think there has to be the consciousness at our organizational level. I think at Oxfam Pilipinas, we're really keen on engaging people's organization and the civil society movement in the energy transition space. So our main stakeholders, our main targets are basically women in the communities, young people in the communities, to be actively engaged and actively involved in not only in the discussion, but of course in the whole decision making process of energy transition. And how would we ensure their participation? We have to be more purposive with how we engage them. One is, it has to be clear that this is for them, that the benefits and the co-benefits of energy transition are for the women, the marginalized sector, like for the workers, for young people. It has to be clear in our message that this is for them. And of course, I think in terms of the projects and in policy influencing, you have to share the space with them especially when you talk with local governments. I think there's also a question on how we engage with local governments. we share the space with the communities, with our local partners, with the women organization that we engage with. We bring them in legislative processes, and then we amplify and we let them speak for themselves about how this energy transition is actually beneficial, both for the local governments and for the community. So those are some very specific but also practical and I think scalable, replicable ways that we experience at Oxfam Pilipinas and our partner, CCAT. On number two, if there are specific data collection methods, I've mentioned in passing in my presentation that we did a rapid care analysis in the small island community. So the rapid care analysis is basically it tries to surface, unpaid care and reproductive burden of women at the household level. So this tool is actually more very specific on care work, on unpaid care work, but we could use it, to surface very important data, specifically on time use, on energy poverty, for example, on how they use their time at housework level, and which of those activities, daily activities, are energy intensive, or which are those that has to be that the energy transition can address in the future. So I think the specific tool, rapid care analysis tool that we use, helped us inform programmatic and policy in terms of our policy agenda at the local and community level.
Thank you, Cheng. I hope that answers Rauda's questions. And before I continue to read another questions, maybe we have colleagues here from Vietnam or other colleagues from Philippines. We have Bantai Kita, and maybe you can share to us. Just raise your hand, and our committee will allow you to speak. Maybe there's other colleagues from. I saw someone from Vietnam. And also from Philippines, other than Oxfam in Philippines, there's Beverly from Bantai Kita. Would you like to share? If you want, just raise your hand, and the committee will allow you to talk. Because we okay. So Abdun, please help me to allow these attendees to talk. Okay, Beverly. Hi,
Can you hear me?
Beverly. Yeah,
Hi.
I can hear you.
Okay. Actually, I typed my question or my comments in the Q&A chat box. I'm just interested to get the contact details of Cheng Pagulayan. Thank you for your very nice presentation, and all the other panelists. Also because Bantai Kita is very interested in understanding your current work on just energy transition, because this JET is currently being included as one of the requirements, or one of the things that has to be included in the monitoring of the requirements for the EITI, Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative. And then we have an initial work now in a mining area in Dinagat Islands. So Dinagat Islands is located in the northern part of Mindanao in the Philippines. And this is a mineral reservation area. The entire island is a declared mineral reservation area because of nickel. And so we wanted to amplify the voices of the communities where the nickel is being sourced out, no? So our nickel from the Dinagat Islands and from the region is being brought to China, Japan, and Australia. And I think we are second in Indonesia in terms of a big source of nickel for the first world countries to be able to continue their energy transition thing. And so when we talk about energy transition, we wanted also to include the communities who are the sources of these minerals that is very important to make batteries and all the other technology for energy transition. And so now when you go to the islands, they are highly impacted. Their farms are impacted, their fishing livelihoods are impacted, but no one is talking about them. And that's the work of Bantay Kita now, because we wanted to include them in the entire discussion of this energy transition. So we wanted to talk to you maybe, and then maybe we can share resources, and maybe you can also help us orient us on the work that you have been, the great work that you've been working in the other islands in the Philippines. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Beverly, for the sharing, and also good luck for the projects right now. And maybe Cheng, you can give some reaction to the Beverly sharing.
Yeah, actually, thanks, Beverly. We've been meaning to reach out to Bantay Kita in the Philippines because I think Oxfam in its previous operations have been a partner of Bantay Kita, Publish What You Pay Philippines. So it's also a great opportunity and opportune time, of course, to reconnect and try to socialize and collaborate with our work on just energy transition. So yeah, I'll reach out, Beverly, and of course, I think with our engagement with the Philippine EITI would also be a great platform for influencing their processes and the energy transition landscape of the mining and extractive industry sector.
Okay. Thank you, Cheng. I think we already read all of the questions.
I have a question though.
Okay. Go ahead, Ersha.
Hello everyone. Let me introduce myself. I'm Ersha from Publish What You Pay Indonesia. I have a question mainly for our friends in Southeast Asia. And beforehand, I would like to apologize if this has been addressed beforehand in your presentations, but I would like to know if there is any kind of struggles or challenges that has been occurred during the processes of trying to mainstreaming the issues gender and in the energy transition, be it like data collecting or probably the mainstreaming itself in the society, because I would really love to hear about that story if there is any. Thank you.
Thank you, Ersha. Maybe our panelist who wants to answer first about the challenge and the struggles on mainstreaming this issue. Maybe Mbak Mona or Mbak Grita.
The challenges, I think I will ask on the CSO side, yeah.
Okay.
Like I said before that when we talk about the regulation in terms of energy transition regulation or policy, in my opinion, when I attend several discussions that held by the NGOs or CSO, usually they invited only NGOs that has a knowledge on energy transition or natural resources governance and etc. But I think it's so if you want to mainstreaming this JETC issue, it's not only for the government. The government already have a lot of regulation on it, on the gender mainstreaming, on the energy transition that should include the women and child and vulnerable people. We have government already have a lot of policy. So, but one thing that they lack is the discussion or with the women rights organization or people with disability organization. Like I said before, in the case of one of the legislator. And so that's one of the challenging. So it's important to, if you want to mainstreaming this issue, first we as the CSO should invite it, women rights organization, people with disability organization in every event that we want to do as a participant or as the resource person. So because when PWYP talk with one of the DPO, people with disability organization, they asked that they didn't have the knowledge. They rarely get invited by the government or even by the CS. And at the same time, they feel shy to attend maybe to attend several discussion that we held, because they felt that they didn't have the knowledge. So to cut off this stream, we should have invite more WRO and DPO in our event. So when we talk with the government, when we do the audience or something like that, we should also invite our colleague from the WRO and DPO. So I think that's one of the challenges. In CSO side. I think Greta can give more.
Thank you, Mbak Mona. Mbak Greta, you can answer the questions.
Sorry, the question is about the challenges.
Yeah, the challenge and the struggle on mainstreaming the gender.
Yeah, the struggle. I think first thing first is about the data. When we did the research and collecting the data in developing the gender impact assessment, for example, we were searching why, for example, in one area, they don't the project developer don't really mention how many women, how many children impacted from the coal-fired power plant, for example, from the coal-fired power plant, the air impacted from the air pollution, for example, because it is a strong strong connection. They have strong what's that? Strong connection between air pollution and the ISPA. What is it? ISPA in English? Is it ISPA?
Trouble breathing issue?
Yeah, a problem with breath issues, respiratory issues. And because there are lots of there are many children and many women in that area actually have in near the coal-fired power plant area actually had like death respiratory problems. But in the environmental impact assessment, that data somehow not been assessed and not been shown. So we are searching in depth about the from the data sources, and we acknowledge and we saw that unfortunately in local institutions, for example, they don't have, even in the health institutions, dinas kesehatan in there, or in the puskesmas, maybe they don't have this disaggregated data. How many men or how many women and how many children affected by affected by this or affected the respiratory issues, for example. So the this disaggregated data is one example, and that's from the health issues, and it become more lacking from the workforce issues. So the identification of how many men and how many women who are working in formal and working in informal areas also not really good database, not really good in a good database, and it becomes more important, yeah, and it becomes more challenging to mainstream such issues in the policy making. And the second thing is about the culture itself, because one day I gave training to the local governments regarding this tools, regarding gender impact assessment tools, and this local governments say that it will not be possible to be implemented in my area, because in my area there is a culture when a woman say when a woman give their perspective, when a woman for example joining the public consultation, it's they are not allowed to even culturally, they are not allowed to even join the public consultation, because it's a man's job to defending their families, for example, from the projects, from the developments. So this perspectives, this culture also becomes the main challenges in mainstreaming such issues, unless we provide, as my presentation before, we provide the trainings, for example, to fathers, to men, about this gender perspective, so they can defend their wife's rights, their mother's rights during the public consultation, for example. So yeah, I think the basic, it's not basic, it's systematic. This is systematic issues called by culture that also becomes the challenges in mainstreaming. Yes.
Thank you, Mbak Grita, and also Mbak Mona, for the answer. I hope that answers the questions from Ersha. And everyone and our colleagues, we are already run out of time. That means we have to end this webinar. We hope that from this webinar you can get some insights, and also mainstreaming the issue of the gender, social inclusion, and people with disability on energy transitions. Thank you so much for the participation, and don't forget to fill out our attendance list, and don't forget to follow our regional forum that will be conducted in Jakarta, 29 until 31 of August. I will see Cheng right there. See you. See you, everyone. Bye.
Cheng, Bon.
Thanks,
Day.
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you. Salamat.
Thank you.
Salamat,
Salamat.
Bev.
Yeah, see you. Bye.
See you.